Welcome to the Sharp Mind Show, episode 14. I'm Nate, the Fit Future MD, your host. Make sure you shop at instracell.com. Pick you up a cool inspirational t-shirt today. All right, so I'm about to talk about what everybody wants to know about, right? And it's called the rich people debt hack. All right, it's called borrow until you die, right? So, if you wake up one morning and you find yourself rich, right? So, what people will do is instead of selling off their assets, what they're going to do is they're going to borrow against the assets, right? So, let's say the key to this is that you have to have assets, right? So, you have to have gotten rich. So, most people, they hear this and are like, well, when I get my first million, I'll think about it, right? But what people have, kind of forgotten is that you can get rich slow over time too, right? So if you're a normal person and, you know, you have a house, you have a, regular job, average salary now is I think 70,000, you know, but I still do my math on 60,000 because I think most people are making 60,000. They're just outliers that are higher, But so even if you do the math on that, and say you get up to $4 or $5 million in assets, over 30 or 40 years, instead of selling off those assets, what you're going to do is you're going to go to the bank and say, hey, I have these assets, and how much would you loan against these assets, right? Based on how much the assets are making, right? So that's kind of the hack, right? So, and then, instead of selling off your assets just continue to grow, right? And then what's the even better hack, right? So say you get up to 4 or 5 million in assets, after your 30 years or however long you've been investing. Most people can get to financial freedom within 10 years, right? So keep that in mind. That's, I'm a life coach and that's what I teach. Is how what I teach to people, right? Regular people to get to the financial freedom goal in less than 10 years. Usually, no matter where they're starting from, but so the idea is you go to the bank. The bank says, okay, I'll give you, if it's stocks, they're probably not going to give you but 50% of what the stocks are worth, right? So you're obviously going to, have a smart head about it and only borrow what you actually need, right? So they're going to go in, they're going to borrow, so say you got 4 million, they're going to go borrow 1 million, and just say the payment on that million is, say, 30,000 a year, something like that. Well, their $4 million is easily going to cover that $30,000 a year, right? If you do 10, if you're making 10% on your money, you're pretty much going to cover that $30,000 or $40,000 that you're going to pay on the million that you borrowed, right? Because most of the time they're going to give you this interest rate at 3, 4, 5%. Let's say Elon Musk's percentage is like under 1, so that kind of thing. So, but this is basically the borrow and then die method, right? So you borrow, your assets are covering the interest, and then another thing. So what a lot of rich people will do is they'll take that $1 million, and instead of just living on it, they'll take $500,000 and say, okay, well, I'm gonna take half a million, I'm gonna put it as a down payment on this mansion, right? So say $500,000, that gets you like a $3 or $4 million mansion, and I'm gonna leverage that, right? Especially real estate's been hot, that $3 or $4 million property all of a sudden became 10 million, 12 million. Once again, I'm not gonna sell the property. I'm just gonna refinance the property, right? You pay the million back, or even more. You made the money, buy more assets that way, and it's just a vicious repeating cycle, right? So this is called the rich people debt hack. And the reason you do the rich people debt hack is to avoid taxes on your assets, right? Because when you sell assets, you have to pay taxes. When you borrow against the asset, you don't pay taxes on that. You just pay banking fees, right? So banks love these because you pay the fees, and they're short-term, 5-year loans, 10-year loans, very short-term things, and they get their money back, and they get the fees, and that's how they pay their people, right? So this is called the rich people debt hack. Now, as I said before, the key to the rich people debt hack is getting rich, right? So I asked ChatGPT to say, what are the best ways to make a scalable business? Like, what businesses would you actually, go into, to get to this, level where you could actually do this, right? Let's say you have, when you're talking about going on the millionaire fast lane here, that's basically the question, like, what businesses are the best to get to the millionaire fast lanes? That means they have to have need, control, scale, and time leverage, right? The Fastlane Commandments, right? So, all right, so going through these one by one, what businesses, if you're going to open businesses, what's the easiest way to get, to a scalable outcome, right? Number one thing was digital products, right? Online courses, coaching programs, digital downloads, membership sites, right? And you're seeing, that's why you're seeing this is basically like the biggest time ever to see, coaching and online courses and digital programs and all that kind of stuff. But my thing is, most of the time it's not a information issue, right? Most of the time it's a keep you accountable or application issue, right? So that's why, I'm a life coach, and I actually spend that one-on-one time with you so that, it's because it's an application issue. It's not a information issue. Most people already know all the information that people are talking about, right? And it's really just getting it done, right? So that's why I lean towards the coaching side, right? Because I'm a life coach. But, there are people that are still making money on online courses and stuff like that. Digital downloads. So like, I know people that have made like budgeting spreadsheets, stuff like that. Obviously with Dave Ramsey coming out with a free app that basically does all that stuff for you, it's kind of hard to compete with, the best comes out with a free app. But speaking of apps, number 2 was software / SaaS, or software as a service. So you got subscription apps, business to business software, productivity platforms. So basically, we did the math, right? So going back a second, doing the math. If you sell a $500 program to $2,000 of people, that's $500 program to 2,000 people. That's $1 million a year, right? So, if you get, 100,000 followers, you think you can get 500 people to pay you $500 a year? So that's what, that's $1 million, right? If you get 2,000 people, right? So keep that in mind. That's why digital products is probably number 1, because of the high profit margin. And then, so you imagine you make $1 million and you keep 700,000 of it. Like, that's pretty freaking good, So, all right. So the second one is software as a service, or software. Biggest thing is that most software is recurring revenue now. So even you got Microsoft Office. Microsoft's one of the biggest on the planet. Microsoft Office, Microsoft Teams. You're paying monthly subscriptions now for all that kind of stuff. Adobe $60 a month. So you're actually editing videos for a living. You're paying that software company $60 a month. So, but if it was $50 a month to make the app easier, that's only 1,700 active users to make a million, which is why Adobe's so hot. Their market cap is way up there because they probably got millions of people paying $64 a month or whatever it is, right? But that's software, right? All right, so this is the one that one of the ones that I chose to do first, and that's e-commerce. So basically, I'm selling t-shirts online, right? The audience online is massive, right? So you got a worldwide audience. Ads and social media can scale you fast, and if you do the business correctly, you'll have repeated customers, right? So the only reason I'm still in business is because of repeated customers, right? Because every year my customers come back and buy another shirt from me, right? Because I do a good job, because I make a high quality shirt and I make it in their sizes. So, a lot of companies won't do, big man sizes, and, they don't go to 4 and 5X. And so, a lot of people, won't, a lot of people will come back to my company just because I offer those sizes, right? But if you can get, the average order to be $50, 20,000 orders a year, you're at $1 million, right, in revenue. Now, obviously, e-commerce, the margins are not as high, right? So if you go 20% margin, so that's $10 an order. So 10 times 20, you do the math, right? That's actual profit, right? So it's 1/5 of 250,000 a year, right? Basically, instead of that's your actual profit, right? So e-commerce is good to get up there, but your margins are not going to be as good, right? They're still better than traditional where you're in stores and stuff like that. But I'd personally rather be in somebody else's store as a brand than to have my own store as a brand. Obviously, that's not working out for a lot of companies, right, to have their own stores. But so moving on, you got content and media businesses. Say you build an audience of 500,000 to 1 million people. You get them to spend $2 with you every year. That's $1 million. That's YouTube channels, podcasts right now. So we're building a podcast right now, right? I'm trying to teach. I'm trying to have a space where we actually talk about intelligent things, right? We don't talk about, it's good to be entertained sometimes, but everything doesn't need to be, we're cracking some joke. It's nice to crack a joke every once in a while, don't get me wrong. But, I'm building this podcast for people that are intelligent, right? Not, that want to be intelligent, that want to know things, that want to, understand the stock market, understand business, that kind of thing. So, but that's content media. Like I say, if you can get $2 per person, you're at $1 million, or you can, go lower than that. 50,000 people, you get them to spend $50, whatever. You're sitting over $1 million, right? So hopefully that math is right. And then they got agency and servicing businesses, marketing agency, video editing, right? So you can pretty much easily go to, if you have a small town with businesses, most of the time, they're not set up with the internet, they're not set up with AI. You can obviously build an agency around that. So this is the easiest one to get customers, the hardest one to fulfill, in my opinion, right? So I tried this back in 2016 and spent, I could get customers no problem, but it was fulfilling it was hot. You're talking about 10% margins on fulfillment, and then you got to do a good job and deal with people, like, the whole 9 yards. But if you can get somebody to pay you $5,000 a month, that's only 17 clients a year, right? So it's the easiest one, but to get, it's easy to get 17 clients. It's hard to fulfill those 17 clients, right? $5,000 a month, and you're paying a person, your person's going to be $3,000 a month at least now, right? Even in a small area, right? So keep that in mind. So that leaves you with $2,000, and you got to buy cameras, you got to buy space, you got to go do the work, that kind of stuff, right? So, all right. So we just talked about, how the rich keep getting richer, but the last one is real estate, right? Whether you're doing short-term rentals, multifamily, flipping properties. The biggest thing with this one is leverage, so you don't have to have as much capital to get the leverage to do the stuff. Obviously, assets appreciate and generate cash flow, but if you own 50 units, cash flow $2,000 a year each, that's $1 million. If you flip 10 houses a year, $100,000 profit, most of the time you're going to be making 50. Average is 50, I think now. So you're going to do 20 houses a year and make $1 million. That, let's say this is high leverage and capital heavy, right? So what's the pattern in all these? You solve real needs, you use leverage, and you aim for recurring and repeat revenue, right? So that's actually how, that's the millionaire fast lane. Those are the top 6, right, to get to the millionaire fast lane right now currently. Now, are those the best for the market? Probably not, right? Like, you start looking at the S&P 500, they all in different niches, right? Like, they're experts at whatever they're doing, but those are billionaires, not millionaires, right? Billionaire companies, not millionaire companies, right? So, so obviously if you look at what I'm doing, right? If you look at what I'm doing, I'm obviously doing digital products, right? I have several digital products. Most of the time I give them away for free as a loss leader, or basically to earn your trust, I give them away for free, right? My digital products. I don't have a software company. I do have an e-commerce brand. I would rather you just buy a t-shirt from me, obviously, because everything's about mindset. Everything's about how you live your life. Everything is about your belief system, what you believe. And InstaSale can help you change that. So that's why I opened InstaSale, and it's an apparel brand, right? So hopefully you like it. Go check it out, InstaSale.com. Also doing the podcast, right? YouTube and the media business, right? So I'm doing that one. So I'm doing a few of them, and obviously I have real estate, right? But I'm not a flipper in real estate. I'm buy and hold forever. I'm doing the rich people debt hack, right? All right, so that's going through what things that could possibly get you to that millionaire mark, that millionaire fast lane, and actually get you using the rich people debt hack, right? So this episode is brought to you by London and the Googly Goo, which is my wife's book. If you have nieces, nephews, or children of your own, make sure you check out London and the Googly Goo. It's available on Amazon, and it's also available digitally in the links below. So go pick that up if you're interested. All right, so we'll probably do the next two kind of short. We're already kind of long on the slide, but go with the quote of the day. And the quote of the day is grind for a season, not your whole life, right? So too many influencers are telling people that they just need to grind, right? But the truth is, in business, you build systems, right? So you don't need to grind forever. You just need to build the system that takes the grind away from you, right? Most business owners should be actually bored out of their freaking mind, right? Because if you build the system, you won't even be involved, with the system, right? So keep that in mind. If you're grinding right now, you're doing all the work, and you're not going up in places, like check your systems, make sure your systems are right, and you'll see yourself become better, right? And your life will be more fulfilled. You won't be so tired and wore out. But you do grind for a season to set up all your systems, right? So, all right. And so lastly, Inflation is coming in hot, right? It's coming in at 0.3 for August, which is 3.1% for the year. What does that mean for rate cuts, right? So this is obviously going back to the stock market. Stock market, is pricing in right now that the rates are going to cut, and so that means people's margins are going to get higher. So therefore, stocks are going to be worth more money, right? That's what they're pricing in. But if I've said this probably, I said it a while back, but the Fed is basically going to let inflation run hot, right? They have no choice because the only thing they can do is to change the interest rates to battle inflation. But that's not really the root cause of the inflation, right? The root cause of the inflation is the fact that we don't have, especially in the real estate market, we just don't have the inventory for the amount of people that actually want to buy a home, like stuff like that. Now, there might be people that, there's no inventory in the area that people can afford to buy the home, right? So if most people are, if most 2-income households are making $66,000, you're not buying a $400,000 house at a 6% interest rate. You just can't do it. The math, it doesn't math, right? So you either need a lower cost house or a lower interest rate. And so you expect the Fed to keep inflation running hot. They're going to lower interest rates. When the Fed starts lowering interest rates, usually 9 months later, we go into recession, right? So keep that in mind. So if they lower the interest rate here in September, 9 months from September, you're probably going to have to be, either be in the recession or, you may not know you're in a recession, but I think common people have known that we've been in a recession for a long time. And the reason we're being in a recession for a long time is because they're just getting squeezed by this high inflation, right? And so if it comes in at 3.1%, that means once again, you're going to be squeezed, right? Because most companies give a 2%, raise every year, if they can. And guess what? They're going to get squeezed with inflation too. Their costs too. I just talked about Ford Motor Company getting squeezed by inflation, that kind of thing. So that's what rate cuts really are going to mean. Rate cuts are going to mean 9 months from now, we're going to have a recession of some kind. Now, the recession doesn't have to last. A recession doesn't have to last forever, but, most of the time recessions are, between 6 months and 18 months, right? So keep that in mind. It doesn't mean that, they keep inflation running hot. They might keep inflation running hot through the recession, right? And that kind of contradicts itself since, you're supposed to be going down, right? But if they want to average, you got to keep in mind, if they want to average 2%, and we've been running hot for 5 years, the second 5 years is going to be, negative, right? So keep that in mind as well. All right, so this episode, has been brought to you by me. I'm a life coach, right? I'm Nate. I'm a life coach. And, if you're interested in life coaching, you're interested in starting your e-commerce business, you're interested in, any of the other businesses I talked about today, hit me up, sign up for life coaching. Let's get you started down that road. If you're interested, if you're a regular person and you're interested in figuring out how to get to financial freedom as a regular person, not using the Millionaire Fastlane, hit me up for life coaching as well. In the link below. If you have any questions, you can always hit me up on Instagram, at FitFutureMD1. And make sure you shop at InstaSell.com. Pick up my wife's book, Money in the New You. And we'll see you guys in the next piece.